mist is hanging low. Boots crunch the frost where the grasses grow. Rifle slung in a heart that's steady. Oh, the wild calls out and I'm already ready. The honey.
All right, welcome back to the Inside Spread podcast. Today we're diving into one of the most legendary whitetail stories that has ever been told. It is the James Jordan buck. If you've been in the whitetail hunting world for any amount of time, you've probably heard whispers about this deer. It's the kind of buck that makes you stop scrolling, lean in, and ask, is this story even real? Personally, I know very little about the stories. When Travis brought it to my attention, I was very interested to find out more. Today, the Jordan buck is still one of the highest typical white tails ever taken in the United States. It's not just a legendary buck because of its size, but it has a very bizarre story behind it. Joining me again today is Travis to walk us through what happened with the James Jordan buck.
Hey, thanks for having me again. And yeah, the crazy thing about this deer is the hunt is only half the story.
Yeah, it's just scratching the surface.
Oh, for sure.
So we're going to kind of talk about the hunt just a little bit. So my first question is, what made the hunt interesting? What makes it special from a scoring standpoint? And it's kind of mentioned as a perfect 5.5 typical with no abnormal points. So why is it so rare?
Well, just that. The measurements on this buck, I mean, when you start breaking down this deer, it had 30-inch main beams. The G2 points were 13 inches and 13 and 1/8 inches. But I think the big thing that everybody notices when you see this deer or you see just a replica of it, because there's replicas everywhere, it's just the mass of it. It's just insane. It has seven, so the H4 circumference on the right side is 7 inches,
Mm-hmm.
6 and 7/8 on the left. I mean, it's just ridiculous how palmated it is, how heavy it is. It's just it's just one of a kind as far as being symmetrical, for being heavy, and just being all around massive. Uh, Probably the craziest thing about this deer is it has no abnormal points, and the difference between both sides is only 3 and 2/8 inches, which when a buck gets this big, I mean, it's unheard of. It's insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to be, you know, almost identical on both sides. They kind of talk about antlers as almost like your fingernails, or your fingerprints, where they're identical to humans, and they're, each one's different. And so to have these be almost exactly the same is very unusual.
Yeah, and one of the points is actually damaged a little bit. It looks like he damaged it in velvet. So, it probably would have scored a little bit higher. We should mention how high it scored. It scored 206 and 1/8 inches as a clean 5x5 typical. So, there's not many bucks that hit that 200-inch mark uh, as a typical whitetail, much less as just a 5x5. Usually, you need at least 6 points on each side to hit that number.
If you could just share with us just a little bit. Obviously, we don't have all the details of where exactly it came from, but just a little, info about, where it was shot and all those things.
Yeah, I can kind of tell the story of it. It's a pretty well-known story. But this buck was shot back in 1914, which I think is another interesting wrinkle to it, because there's so many hunters these days who are so skeptical over any big deer that they see now. It's like, oh, it came from a ranch, it came from a high fence, it came from that. This deer is predating that by 60, 70 years. So
Mm-hmm.
there's no question it's a legit wild whitetail, but it was shot in Burnett County, Wisconsin, which is kind of right on the Minnesota-Wisconsin border.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and James Jordan, he's just a average, everyday guy. From as far as we know, or from what I've read, he was just, a guy who did odd jobs on the side. And November 20th, 1914, he got together with a friend and they just went out to go do some deer hunting. Um, One thing we should mention in terms of Wisconsin in 1914 and pretty much all of North America is deer numbers were like really low back then.
Hmm.
Just because there was unchecked market hunting for so many years,
Yeah.
so you know, I believe Wisconsin had only recently implemented deer seasons when this hunt took place and bag limits. Before that, it was a free for all, which is why the numbers are so low.
Yeah.
But basically, they went out and they cut some whitetail tracks, and Jim followed the biggest set of tracks and ended up jumping this gigantic buck. And he basically just started unloading on it. And he felt like one of the shots hit pretty well, uh, but he wasn't for sure yet until his friend came and they started looking for it. We should mention the caliber of the rifle that he used.
Yeah.
Uh, he was using he was using a 2520 WCF. It was a Winchester model 1892. And if you
Nice.
read on there's the North American Whitetail article on it. It said this light hitter has less energy at the muzzle than a 243 Winchester has at 800 yards. And evidently, it's not even legal for use in Wisconsin anymore. I did a little bit of background research on this, and funny enough, they do still make it. It's
Oh,
been around for like 150 years or something like that. It's been around a long time, but yeah, it's kind of crazy that he was using such a light cartridge. But
yeah. That's
uh,
probably why he
either
probably
way,
shot it so many times.
it might have been. I do know that he used pretty much every round that he had in the gun, and he had to dig around in his pocket a little bit, and he had like one last round left. And so, they found a bit of blood, and basically he tracked it straight to the Yellow River. And once he got to the river, he saw the buck was, sitting on the bank. So he fired off one more shot, and that finally put him down for good. But then his friend came up and they checked it out. Um, I believe the story was that Jim forgot his knife, so he had to go back and get his knife. And when they came back, the buck was gone,
Oh boy.
and it turns out it had drifted down the river, and so they had to go about 200 yards down the river to find the deer again, which I can't even imagine how much I'd be freaking out. Deer of this caliber, just suddenly vanished. Fortunately, they did find it. Um,
Yeah.
one other crazy wrinkle about this story is that it's claimed in several articles that the buck weighed 400 pounds,
Jeez.
which I have a very hard time believing. I could believe maybe 300 pounds. 400 pounds sounds like I
I
just
mean,
can't even imagine a buck
that's a
that
large
big.
bear.
It is. It's that's gigantic. It's so I don't know how true that part of the story is. We don't have any photos of the deer on the hoof, obviously, because so long ago, and
Yeah.
probably a lot of people didn't take photos of their deer back then.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
I mean, there are some floating around, but it probably wasn't on the forethought of their minds.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, at that time, even caring about the size of the antlers was not really probably a thing that happened very often, just because they just came out of the market hunting era, and you know they're just hunting for meat at this point, so they had no real care about
Well, that
what
was
antler scores
the
were.
main reason he was out there. He was out there to get meat. It's kind of like the story of the world record bass. He was out there fishing because he was hungry because it was the Great Depression at that time.
Yeah, sure. Well, there is a also a large mystery that associates the story. It's a cool hunting story, but that is just scratching the surface. So now we're going to introduce another character. His name is George Van Castle. He is the taxidermist who we think is the person who made this buck disappear. What happened to it? Did anyone ever track him down? And is this part of the story still a mystery?
Yeah, so we should kind of talk about what happened. So actually, Jim Jordan did recognize he was very proud of the deer, obviously. So he wanted to get it mounted, and so yeah, he found this George Van Castle character who lived in I believe he lived in Hinckley, Minnesota, which is It's a little bit west of Danbury, Wisconsin. And
Hmm.
basically, they came to an agreement that he would mount the buck for $5, which was a lot of money back then, obviously.
Yes.
It's crazy to hear that now, but
Yeah, for
uh,
sure.
they did an agreement, and Van Castle took the buck. Um, so about a year goes by, and Jordan obviously starts getting a little bit antsy, like, what's going on? Where's my buck at? You know, um, and so he actually traveled all the way over there. Uh, my bad, it was Webster with Minnesota is where Van Castle lived. I just
Hmm.
saw that. But when Jim went back to Webster, he found out that he'd moved to Minnesota. Um, and apparently he wasn't too worried about it when he heard that the taxidermist had moved. Uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, after a year had gone by, he's like, okay, what's going on? So he went over there, and that's when he found out, oh yeah, he left town. He moved to Florida,
Jeez.
which which I can't even imagine. Like, so first off, this guy is a horrible taxidermist because he just doesn't, let the guy know what in the heck, he didn't obviously didn't finish the mount, or
Hmm.
nobody really knows what happened at that point. But
Yeah.
either way, Jordan was just absolutely heartbroken, and how couldn't you
Yeah.
be? I mean, it's like this is a buck of 1,000 lifetimes, not just a lifetime. And in 1914, it wasn't like, you can hop on Facebook and like track this guy down. It's like,
Sure.
what are you going to do? There
Yeah.
wasn't anything he could do.
You could barely
And
even
so,
drive to Florida at that point.
oh yeah, yeah, the roads are terrible back then, I'm sure. So, basically, from what we've heard, I guess he didn't stop searching for the deer, but like after that, we never hear from Van Castle ever again. And it's like, so nobody seems to know what happened to him, and
So,
he had no idea what happened to the deer.
all right. That's crazy to me. I can't even imagine. Think about anybody disappearing just like that versus, somebody who has your, huge buck that you just shot a year ago.
Yeah, as we were joking before we started recording, it's like the moral of the story here is you need to vet your taxidermist
Yeah.
before you have some. But
Yeah.
should I describe what happened next from there?
Yes. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So so basically, we fast forward all the way to 1958, uh, and Jordan has not seen his buck in all these years. Nobody knows what happened to it. And there's a man named Bob Ludwig who comes into story at this point.
Hmm.
And he was just at a rummage sale outside of Sandstone, Minnesota, which is just a little bit north of Hinckley. It's not that far away.
Yeah.
And
It's
he
not really
finds
that
this.
far from Webster either. It's not,
No, it's not. Like if you put in all these different places, it's only about 30 miles to all three locations. Um, but anyway, he's at this yard sale, and he sees this beat up old deer mount, and it's this giant 10 pointer, and he's intrigued by it, and so he ends up buying it for $3. And the only ID on the back as to what it is it says shot in 1914 on the back.
wow.
And so he didn't know what happened to it. He didn't know where it came from, and apparently neither did the owner who had it originally. Um, but around that time, that's when Boone and Crockett was kind of starting up, and uh, they were starting to recognize records. Um,
Hmm.
another big buck from Minnesota, the Breen buck, had been certified as the world record at that
Okay.
time. Um, and so Ludwig, he's looking at this giant 10 point that he has, and he's like, hmm. So he starts putting a tape measure to it, and he's like, this thing is bigger than the Breen buck. And so, and so what ended up happening is he ended up contacting a scorer I can't remember where the scorer was from, but originally they were going to have a meeting to where the guy could measure the deer. For whatever reason, and again, details lost to time, the meeting never happened, but the
Mhm.
scorer ended up in the area where Ludwig lived like a year later, and he saw his name on a sign. And so he was like, huh, I wonder if that's the same guy. So he stopped in and saw the deer. So it's probably pure stupid luck that the deer actually got scored
Mhm.
because the score was that's one of the lesser talked about parts of this story is like it was just random stupid chance that the scorer
They ran
actually,
at each
you
other.
know, yeah, it's like what in the heck?
Yeah.
But they ended up scoring it, and that's when they came up with 206 and 5/8 net, and they realized that hey, this is the new number one typical. And because they didn't know anything about it, they named it the sandstone buck
Yeah.
because it's found in sandstone, Minnesota, and I believe that's where Boone and Crockett originally listed the location of the harvest.
Yeah. That kind of leads into the next thing is like, obviously, then they didn't know that James shot this buck. They just found them out. So they had no idea. So how did it get from that point to where they scored it to, maybe to declaring it the world record and then also attributing it to eventually to James?
This is where the story gets even wilder because the Bob Ludwig, it turns out that his uncle was James Jordan.
Whoa.
of all things, it's like, what are the odds of this? So at some point, he showed his uncle the buck, and obviously he freaked out because this was the deer he'd been seeking for over 50 years.
Yeah.
So that's how they kind of found out that, oh, yeah, this is it. Um, there was some skepticism early on because it's like, how can this possibly be it? I can kind of understand it. It's like, yeah, right. This is it you know, and
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how Boone and Crockett attributed this buck to Jim. I know that Jim he sent like a letter to Boone and Crockett, kind of pleading his case, and the details are a little bit vague, but it sounds like there was some eyewitness testimony at some point. Someone was still alive who saw the buck when Jim had it, and they kind
Yeah.
of verified. At least that's what it sounds like. Boone and Crockett is a little bit hazy on all the details of that, but that's how they eventually attributed the buck to his name, and they eventually got the location right as being in Wisconsin instead of Minnesota.
Yeah. That's, I mean, it's in very interesting to think about because like there's a huge chain of custody piece that went from him having it in his hands in the woods to getting taxidermied and then being found at a rummage sale to where it is today. And where is it today?
Well, today, as far as I know, it's in Springfield, Missouri at Bass Pro Shops. Uh, they've got like a King of Bucks collection down there. I've been
Hmm.
wanting to go down there and see it myself, and I just haven't been in that area. But there's like a million and a half replicas of it floating around everywhere. I
Yeah.
just saw one in West Virginia at Bass Pro Shops this past summer. Um, but yeah, you pretty much any big sporting goods store, you know, Bass Pro Cabela's, a lot of them have replicas. The
Okay.
Michigan Whitetail Hall of Fame in Grass Lake, Michigan has a replica. So I've seen replicas. I haven't seen the actual deer itself, but there's a lot of places where you can see it and you can kind of compare it to other giants of the whitetail world, if you will.
Yeah. I've driven by the Bass Pro in Springfield before, but I have not gone in there. And everyone tells me that it's obviously a great place to look at some amazing taxidermy. So I definitely next time I drive through that area, I gotta stop there. So a little bit of information here that it is not currently the world record, or even it isn't even the record in the United States at the moment. Who is Mile Hansen, and when did that overtake the Jordan Buck?
So obviously, I mean, it did hold the world record for a long time, but then in a 1993, Milo Hansen shot his 213-inch buck over in western Saskatchewan, and that has been the world record ever since. Um, basically it's not that much larger than it. I've seen replicas of both these deer next to each other, and if
Hmm.
you ask me, I think the Jordan buck would kick the crap out of the Hanson buck in a real fight, but uh, yeah, I like the Jordan buck a little bit better, but
Yeah.
but the Hanson buck is a little bit bigger. It's I believe it's a mainframe 6x6, so it just gives it a little bit more antler. I think it's a little bit taller. It's not as massive. I'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as you mentioned earlier that yeah, a perfect 5.5 with no abnormal points that you know that just looks very symmetrical and it's kind of every hunter's dream to look for that type of deer.
Yeah. And the Hanson buck has a couple of kicker points because I believe it's a 14 point,
Okay. All right.
but they're not super long, so he doesn't lose a whole lot on that.
Nice. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious why a little bit, but you know, the Jordan buck is such an iconic, almost a mythical story because of the story behind it. Do you think that this mystery and tragedy of not knowing the record, Jim not knowing and having the record in his own hands, is that something that's, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of the craziest stories in the whitetail world. One thing I neglected to mention is that when Boone and Crockett finally attached Jim's name to it, it was too late because he had died like 2 months earlier. So he
Hmm.
never saw uh, himself in the record book as number one, which is really, really unfortunate. Um, from everything I've read, he sounds like he was a great guy.
Yeah.
Um, just really passionate about his deer. Um, but yeah, it's the wildest story. The number of coincidences involved in this, you know, for one, the deer never leaving, that area of Minnesota, and then his nephew picking it up. The scorer who just happened to be going by and saw the guy's name on a mailbox. It's crazy. You wouldn't believe it if it was a movie, you
Yeah.
know.
They can almost
It's
make a
just
movie out of it.
they really could. I think it would be a very niche audience, but I'd watch it
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, it's the craziest tale in whitetail hunting that I could think of. I mean, there's some crazy tales out there, but nothing like this. It's such a mystery about, where was the buck all that time? I mean, I've heard some people thinking like, oh, how many times did it change hands then? And it's like, well, you're never gonna know.
Yeah.
You want my opinion? I think it sat in an attic the entire time. I
Yeah.
believe that's where it was found. If you start digging into it, the original owner at the garage sale said that, like, yeah, it was in an attic. So it was up there gathering dust for 50 years. And poor Jim Jordan, he's living less than 30 miles away and had no idea. I mean, that's
Yeah.
sad. It really is.
I mean, even not knowing that it was even done, like he had no idea that
Yeah. I mean,
it could have not have been done.
for all he knew, it was in Florida. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. So that, yeah, pretty crazy story. And, talking about the Jordan buck and also mentioning the Mile Hansen buck. And the reason we're kind of talking about this is because we hope to kind of do a mini series on some legendary bucks coming up here. And so we'll just start seeing some podcasts about some cool buck stories that we got. And this is just the first one. And I think it's probably going to be the craziest one. I'm sure there's going to be some other interesting twists and turns, but man, what a story about the Jordan buck.
there's some crazy, crazy whitetail stories out there. I've done a lot of diving into some of the more famous bucks, and yeah, almost all of them have a good story attached to them.
For sure. Yeah. So we'll look forward to that, and Travis will probably join us for most of them as he has, like I said, done some research on some of these, and I'm happy and excited to learn more about them. So yeah, thank you for joining us today, and we'll catch you next time.
All right.
Echoes of the woods, where the heartbeats meet. Freedom runs wild underneath nature's dome, down by the pine, it feels like home. Crisp wind whispers through the autumn gold, stories of the land, both new and old. Tracks in the dirt, the trail calls my name. Out here in the wild, it's all just the same. Down by